we are. Okay. So Chaley organises these events. We've been running them for a number of years. We were running pre-COVID in person, usually in Leeds. Obviously, we've gone online and we've stayed online like a lot of our lives now are. The group is actually it's the Zero Carbon Yorkshire Buildings Group. If you want to know more about Zero Carbon Yorkshire, you can go to the Zero Carbon Yorkshire website. If you would like to join Zero Carbon Yorkshire, Lucy was, I think, oh, she just popped the link in the chat. Okay, it is also sort of concurrently an AECB, a local group as well, so it sort of doubles up, if you like. If you don't know the AECB, and I suspect most of you do, it's aecb.net. Could you drop that in the chat, Chaley? Yeah, go and have a look. It's the oldest sustainable building organisation in the UK, and the AECB actually established the Passivhaus Trust. It's like a sister company, a sister organisation. We are running these events, the Zero Carbon Yorkshire Building Groups events, run about 3 times a year on average, and we run them sort of in parallel with Insulate Britain webinars, which are normally about retrofit, which I also I organise and chair. So the months that we run these groups, we don't have an Insulate Britain webinar. So if you want to know about those are also publicised through this network as well, through Zero Carbon Yorkshire, or you can sign up for information from Insulate Britain as well. I think that's, yes, I just want to say before we get into this, and I'm not going to talk much more, just to say if you're interested, particularly if you're from the public sector and you're interested in Passivhaus, you still have the opportunity to go to the, or to attend online, the UK Passivhaus conference, which is running in 2 weeks' time. It's the 26th, isn't it, Chaley? That's right, yeah. So I should know, I'm chair of the trust, but I couldn't remember the actual date. So 26th of October in Exeter, and it's free to attend for public sector. Basically, it's trying to get more of the public sector engaged with Passivhaus and learning about what the public sector is already doing. Okay.
Also online as well.
Also
so,
online, yeah.
So I've just put a link in.
Yeah, great, some links there. Okay, so obviously today is all about Passivhaus, and we're going to start by hearing about the groundbreaking work that York are doing. It's very exciting. We've got some really big stuff going on in our own area in Yorkshire. So I'm going to hand over to Sophie Round, who's the Housing Delivery Programme Manager. I had to read that because I didn't actually know Sophie anyway, for York City Council, and she's going to talk about their Passivhaus delivery programme. So over to you, Sophie.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Will you tell me when you can see?
And I will be trying to keep rough timekeeping as well. So
okay, great. Can you see that? Can you see my presentation?
That's fine. That's lovely. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. So yes, thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you today. I'm going to give just a little history on our programme, sorry for those of you who've heard it before, and talk about our current future projects and our work to achieve our zero carbon ambitions and our passive houses, and a few of the challenges that we've experienced so far along the way. So let me see if it's going to let me click through. Yes, there we go. So you'll probably already know, many of you, but York has a pioneering history when it comes to housing. Over 100 years ago, the Sophie Round created New Earswick, which sought to provide good quality, affordable housing, which tackled the social ills of the time, such as slum housing and poor sanitation. And the City of York Council's housing delivery programme, over 100 years later, is aiming to tackle these ills of our time. So they're very different, but they're still very important. So things such as climate change, fuel poverty, and isolation and loneliness. So in 2018, the City of York Council had an ambition to make better use of the council-owned land across the city. And we set out our ambition to deliver over 600 new homes funded from the housing revenue account. At the time, the housing delivery programme was set up, the council under a different administration. So at that point, it was a Conservative administration. And the financial model we were working to was a bit more straightforward. So it was cross-subsidy, so 60% outright sale, And that was going to fund the development of slightly more affordable homes, all to sort of building reg standards. So 20% would be social rent and 20% would be shared ownership. And at this point, we had one site with planning permission, which was our Lowfield Green site, along with 7 other identified sites.
Right, okay. Right. You mean, is that for TV? What you mean?
I'll ask everybody to mute, please. We're getting some interference here. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, great. So after the local elections in May 2019, there was a real step change in our ambitions. So we've now got a Green Lib Dem coalition. Our exec member for housing is from the Green Party, and working with my team and other organisations, we created the Housing Design Manual, which was our statement of intent for the council and the housing delivery team, and set out 5 key principles. So delivering the housing our residents need, so building housing that the market wouldn't necessarily deliver, such as multi-generational housing, things like bungalows that are really hard to find on the open market, building healthy homes and neighbourhoods, so for example, really spacious homes designed to national space standards, building creative and distinctive places that bring communities together, so really high quality amenity space and shared spaces, and building, so reducing our impact on the environment and residents' energy bills. So this is where the certified passive house comes into it, and that was a commitment from the beginning. They would be certified passive house and zero carbon in use. And also supporting sustainable transport choices and connectivity. So it's not just about the buildings themselves, it's about low car parking and everything that comes along with achieving those ambitions. So you can see from our approach, it's very holistic. So we're not trying to just deliver passive house certification, but we're really looking at placemaking to support sustainable communities in the long term. So through a tender process at the time, we also welcomed architects Mikkel Riches and their multidisciplinary design team as our framework architect. And they've got a proven track record of delivering passive house homes to scale, which gave us greater confidence that we'd have the knowledge and experience to deliver the programme of passive house homes. So before we start work on our sites, we undertake lots of research and engagement, which is continued throughout the design stages. We work with our design teams to understand the socio-economic profile of the neighbourhoods. We invite local people to events to talk to us, and work with us to develop the sites. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to skip back again. Just so you can see in this, we're actually in the picture there's some blocks. You can see we do very physical modelling in those sessions. So we try and talk to neighbourhoods about some of the competition and the compromise that you get at the design stage of a project. From the importance of sort of the orientation of the buildings for solar gains, to the land required to provide huge amounts of car parking space, and the density we need to create a viable project. So it's very much a session for understanding both ways. So this is our Lowfield Green site. Lowfield Green site. This was designed prior to the low carbon agenda, so I won't talk too much about it. It doesn't have quite the same objectives. We're still very proud of it, and it's nearly complete. So it delivers 165 homes, including 6 self-build plots and a 19-home community build. The project is largely complete now, and we did take steps to try and improve the environmental performance, but it's very hard to do that retrospectively. So very frequently people have said halfway through the build, can't you make it passive house now? Which is a bit too much of a challenge, I think, halfway through. Since then, we've developed 3 sites in our second phase, using the design manual as our strategic brief from project inception. Our first passive house projects are Duncan Barracks, Burnholme and Ordnance Lane. So Duncan Barracks is the one you can see in front of you. So it's 34 homes and 1 commercial space, and it started on site, started in July this year with Cadett Construction. The next project we've got lined up is Burnholme, so that's 83 homes in total, including 5 self-build plots. The home that you can see there in the foreground is a multi-generational house type, so it's got a self-contained 1-bedroom flat on the ground floor and a 3-bedroom house above, and it can be as flexible as you want, so you can have a 3-floor lift to give access up into the family house. So the idea is you can have maybe relatives with you as they age, all living together in one building. And this is Ordnance Lane. So this is 85 homes with additional community space, intergenerational living to combat isolation and loneliness across generations. And it's got commercial spaces to echo the previous industrial use of the site. The site also has retained buildings, so previous military accommodation called the Married Quarters, which will be refurbished to meet the AnyFit standard, which is currently being priced, and we hope it will start on site next year. So the new homes on the 3 sites are both zero carbon in use and aim to reduce carbon throughout the construction process. So this approach ensures a whole life approach to reducing their impact on the environment. So as most people on this call will probably know, construction accounts for around 40% of the total annual carbon emissions in the UK, and therefore choices such as timber frame construction and recycled content insulation make significant impact on reducing carbon emissions. Typically, our homes have 60% less embodied carbon than a standard new build home. Embodied carbon is an area we're constantly learning and progressing, and whilst we will monitor it throughout the design and build, and it's a key decision-making tool when we're looking at specifications and products. Currently, one of the things we're looking at has raised its head recently, is being really careful with the sort of PV that we specify in the renewables. So often the embodied carbon can be very high in those products, we found through monitoring it. And whilst these help to address fuel poverty for the residents, some of the PV panels themselves contain more carbon than they save over the whole life of the product. The approach to reducing carbon continues throughout the life of each home. So living in an average UK home emits over 5 million tonnes of CO2 every year, making housing one of the largest contributors to climate change in the country. But even an average new build home built to building reg standards will perform better, but still emit around 1.5 million tonnes of CO2 every year. Passivhaus design ensures our homes are well insulated and airtight, maximising solar gain, meaning they require very little or no energy to heat. The energy requirement of these homes, mostly from the lighting, electrical appliances, hot water demand, is offset entirely by utilising the renewable technologies such as PV and air source heat pumps to generate as much power as is needed to heat, light and power the home on an annual basis, reducing the net carbon emissions to zero. The total whole life carbon saving of the new homes we're delivering compared to typical new build homes is estimated to prevent around 153 tonnes of carbon being emitted per property. The graph shows both the embodied carbon and the operational carbon of our homes in blue and the standard new build in orange, demonstrating the saving over time. To put this into context, an average 50 home project over 30-year period would result in carbon saving equivalent of 7 million miles in the car, or 300 times around the world, versus a regular building reg standard development of the same size. And on average, we expect to see a resident reduction in their energy bills of around 70%. So what have been our challenges so far? There's been a few. I'd say viability is a key one. The dramatic change in ambition really impacted our viability model. So before the adoption of the Housing Design Manual, we had quite a straightforward cross-subsidy model where the sales paid off the affordable homes. But since our build costs have increased significantly, this model isn't effective in the way it once was. Some of this can be attributed to the sort of zero carbon Passivhaus ambitions, but also because of the other placemaking priorities like high quality materials, spacious public realms. The viability issue isn't just a result of the zero carbon objectives. Responding to this, we moved to viability appraisal software to interrogate unit types, size and sizes of properties to understand where we're making money and to maximise this and influence design. We received detailed cost breakdowns at each REBA stage to allow us to try to carry out value engineering. Value engineering is also quite complex when you've got these objectives to achieve. So-called easy wins that the developer might bring to us, like reducing the amount of PV, would endanger our ability to meet those zero carbon objectives. So were rejected. We have benefits from developing within the housing revenue account, so we're able to access, we're able to look at our viability in a much longer term. So I think it's worth acknowledging that a council does have some sort of advantages when looking at these types of builds. So we can look at our viability over sort of 30, 40 years, and we've got lower than commercial levels of borrowing costs, which also helps us to deliver. When we look at the viability of individual house types, we've encountered real issues with some of the smaller homes for market sale, and particularly flats, where the demand for these properties has not kept pace with the increased construction costs. However, we found that shared ownership tenure in particular does pretty well over the long term, and we've sought additional grant funding. So we now are increasing the levels of affordable housing of passive house schemes to be 60% affordable over those 3 schemes that I just showed you. Increasing affordable homes on each site does increase the upfront funding requirements, but it actually delivers a longer term better value for money. Undeniably, we benefit from high sales values in York versus many other areas in the region. And 40% of the market sale homes, 40% of the homes, sorry, are market sale, and they're dependent on the cash that brings in to be a success. So the uncertainty in the market at present is always a bit of a worry, although it's hoped that the passive house product will be extremely attractive with rising energy costs. I've called the next slide, sorry, demystifying passive house, but I think it's just the risk that comes with getting future customers, both sales and rented, along with mortgage lenders, surveyors, warranty providers on board with the product. At the moment, demonstrating the increased value of passive house continues to be challenging, and surveyors are often reluctant to show an uplift in the value at the design stage. Whilst we also want to convey the message that passive house is a normal house, so you just live in normally, we do need to start thinking about trying to educate both our purchasers and our tenants of the differences, such as the importance of ventilation, the maintenance of the air source heat pumps and ventilation systems, and not puncturing membranes when putting things up on walls. We're also concerned and working through the legalities. Things like homeowners wanting to extend their properties in the future might be challenging with the wider terrace, and therefore we're looking at selling as leasehold rather than the freehold to keep some control over that. And so that we can hope to educate future purchasers when there are resales in the future. The final challenge I want to highlight is the green skills shortage. So these are fairly large projects, and we struggle to get engagement from contractors, despite feeling like we were engaging constantly for the 2 years up until the tender. So during our tender process, our named timber frame supplier pulled out, which meant a lot of bidders felt very uncertain, and we got quite low numbers of tender returns. Reliance on sort of smallish organisation, particularly for the timber frame, maybe not used to building sort of larger schemes in tandem, has created some concern. So Cadder Construction are now working with us on Duncan Barracks and Burnholme, which is going very positively. However, sort of highlighting the difficulties getting certain packages. So mechanical and electrical seems quite a challenge at the moment, and there's a real green skills technologies gap there. This is something the wider council is trying to combat with its 10-year skills plan, and we've recently received funding to train staff and contractors. However, this still presents as quite a big issue in the marketplace. We're still early in our delivery, so we only started in summer in actual delivery. I always feel a bit fraudulent talking about this before they're built, but the quality on site will be fundamental to the success of the projects. The expectation on the site managers and subcontractors is that they can't just turn up to a site and do what they normally do and what they've always done on other traditional house building jobs, but they need to work from the drawings and understand the importance of the design all the way through. The contractors incentivized to do this through the contract, so they've got payment linked to their 3 airtightness tests. So CADIC are actively training their management teams and appointed airtightness champions on each site, but it's still likely an area we're going to need to come back and tell you about in a year or so to see how that's gone. It's going to be a great area of learning for us, I think. Finally, I would say we're really proud of the recognition that we've received today. So the programme is very outward facing. It promotes sustainable construction, passive house construction, and encourages others in the sector to work towards more sustainable developments. We've received recognition from a number of important and influential publications. So this is a local government association case study of our work. We've been named as a UN International Centre of Excellence for Housing, the first in the UK to receive this. And The Guardian described us as the most ambitious housing delivery programme in a generation. So we've been honoured to receive a number of local and national awards this year, recognising the significance of the housing delivery programme. In our view, every time the housing delivery programme is recognised, it promotes the importance of the work we're doing and how the sector needs to change to actively tackle housing need, fuel poverty, climate change, and that we in the public sector need to lead the way in doing this. That's everything from me. I think we'll probably have a few questions now, but if you want to get in touch outside of this session, then there's an email address there for you.
Lovely, thank you, Sophie. And I think that comment about local authorities leading the way is so refreshing, actually. You know, given the the crisis you have as a result of sell-off of social housing from local authorities. It's I found it refreshing. We've got a couple of questions, and I suspect other people are sort of gearing themselves up at the moment. So I'll ask those first. So Matthew's asked, is there a premium for Passivhaus? With the premium on Passivhaus is basically.
Yeah, a sales premium.
Sales premium. What have you found?
Yeah, well, we really struggled to get it out of surveyors, to be honest. We really, when I take something to board, they ask that I get a RICS accredited surveyor to give me a valuation that says they back it up, and it is something that we've really struggled with. We've managed to get a few on board, and we sort of think, those that we've managed to persuade, they say there's about a 10% uplift for Passivhaus, but it's sort of to be seen. I mean, I think other people are selling at scale and maybe have got more experience of this. So we've relied on people like Norwich that have done social housing. So we don't really know about at scale in this city yet. So we're waiting to see. But I guess my view on it is, we've got a few surveyors that are willing to come on board with us and back us up. But given what's happening out there in the world and how expensive energy bills are, this is a huge saving for people on a month-to-month basis, isn't it? And it has to have some value over that time that you live in a home. It just has to be recognised. So I'm really hoping, because I have to hope with the instability in the market at the moment, I am really hoping that these types of products become very recognised and that the green mortgage sector and all that type of thing, they grow. And yeah, we start to see that uplift. So yes and no, I think there's an uplift, but I'm not sure it's fully recognised yet in the sector.
And I think that point you make about, the world is changing very fast in terms of energy security and bills, as Adam Harper's asked a question, which is actually a comment, I think, really, Adam, but exactly that, what you're saying, higher sales value against that long-term energy security and bills. It's bound to go in that direction, isn't it? And I know we've seen some recognition by RICS that there may be a price premium, but right, onward. There's a question about the type of procurement you use, and I'm not a specialist on procurement, so I'm going to just leave that straight to you. What type of procurement would you suggest? How did you procure?
I mean, it was hard work, I'd say. So obviously, being a public body, we have to go through public procurement. We have to be very open and transparent about what we did. We looked at loads of different frameworks. We talked to people on loads of different frameworks. We actually chose in the end to go with just an open IT team. So this is our long process that we have to do. But that's the route that we chose to do because we felt that we had the full scope of the market, and it was up to us to get out there and do soft market testing and engage with other partners. And at one point, we had quite a few contractors on board. We really did. We sort of hoping we were going to get 6 bids or something, but I think the market has been so buoyant. People have had all the work that they sort of needed without much risk, and this work does present some risk. So particularly when you're looking at scale, it's sort of, I call them the big boys. I think a lot of people do, those big sort of construction companies that we all know. Sometimes I think they err on the side of caution, and they sort of take that easy traditional house building job over this. So we were pleased that we'd done the open market, though, because of the contractor we got, Cadit. They don't sit on many frameworks. They were one of the reasons we wanted to go out to an open market, and we've been really impressed with their sort of engagement, but particularly losing our timber frame supplier, because we specified the timber frame supplier, the same people who had worked on the Norwich project with Michael Richards. They work in Ireland, so they're working more in Ireland than they are over in England. And so we lost them, and it created a lot of nervousness because some of that first airtight testing sat with the timber frame supplier, and then it sort of then was on the shoulders of the contractor. So little things like that happen, and they change your whole procurement activity. What was going really well then isn't going so well. So it was a real roller coaster throughout it, but we're very happy that we've got into contract, and we're hopeful that, Ordnance Lane, our third one, will also get into contract as well in the next few months.
Will you be doing more on sort of disseminating your experience of procurement? Because I think that it's going to be quite key for other local authorities working, in like this, isn't it?
Yeah, we're trying to create a best practice document actually that talks about lots of, so we're relying on some of our sub-consultants to sort of write up bits of best practice, but also from us, from a local authority perspective, because sometimes you speak to other local authorities, and we're lucky because we hold our own stock, so we own over £1 billion worth of property, so we're more able to borrow and things like that. A lot of organisations, a lot of local authorities have sold off their land, and so they don't have quite the same borrowing capacity as us. But when I talk to them, things like us setting up we have a sales brand that we sell under, things like that, the procurement, all of the stuff you have to go through, sort of feels a bit alien, and it's sort of saying, oh no, you can do that. Like, we've done it, you can do it. It takes a bit of thinking about, and it is a labour of love, I'd say. Been working on it for 4 years, and we're only just getting our first sort of passive house out the ground, but I think it's very worth it. And like I said, if we can't do it, we've got all these advantages of lower borrowing, and we need to be setting the standard, because I don't think, there are some examples that do, but I don't think the private market will bring it unless we put some pressure on it.
Thank you. And there is another question around pricing, really, about, will you be forced to sell passive houses below value?
So I would never do that. So the viability software that I have, the way that my team work is that before we sell anything, we would model it, and we would say, are we making a profit on something that's market sale? We've only got 40% of their market sale, so that in my view, they have to really work for us. If they don't work for us, we have the advantage of being a registered provider, where we would go back to Homes England and say, look, it doesn't work. There's a gap here, but we could provide it as affordable housing. So I would never build something and make a loss on it, because that's not what a council's here to do. We're not here to sort of subsidise market housing. We're here to try and promote as much affordable housing as possible, and retain those assets where we can. So no, I wouldn't. It could happen. It could definitely happen. If you weren't tracking your finances all the way through, it definitely could happen. But we won't be doing that.
And you won't be forced to put these up for sale, rental properties?
No, I don't. I mean, you can never say what's coming in the
I would like to
political
predict anything at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I would very much doubt it. We've obviously got our mandate, and unless affordable housing disappears altogether as a tenure, as a thing that we do as a country, but I hope that's not coming, because then I don't have a job. So yeah, hopefully we wouldn't be forced to do that.
Okay, there's a last question I'll ask bring up on pricing. The question of what's a typical cost for a 2- and 3-bed house? Are you able to give anything?
Yeah, it really depends. Some of the first project, Duncan Barracks, that's really near Bootham in York, so it's like 10-15 minutes from the city centre. The prices are really high. So a sort of 2-bedroom house there is about just over 300,000. Whereas sort of the one at the Burnham, the second site, is more sort of town hall, like the east of the city a little bit. That's a little bit cheaper. So it does vary. In a small place like York, it does vary. And basically we're held to a surveyor, so it will vary throughout the lifetime of these projects. They'll be on site for 18 months, 2 years now. So yeah, I'd say a 2-bed's probably around 300,000, but maybe slightly under, maybe slightly over, depending which site it's on. And that will just change depending on where we are in 2 years' time with the housing market.
Of course. Okay, a little bit about the technical, more technical, maybe, around performance monitoring. Are you planning to be doing monitoring and publishing the data?
Yes, I really want to. I've actually got a meeting with the University of York tomorrow, I think, to talk about some of this stuff and how we might have a post in-house to do it. From speaking to Norwich, it seems that they get a lot of people interested, and everybody wanting to do their, PhDs and whatever on it. We'd really like to be able to, not that that's a bad thing, but we'd really like to have some control over what it is that we're monitoring, how we're monitoring it. So yeah, that's something that we're definitely working on. Obviously, we're not at that stage yet, but it's all about being outward looking, sharing information, lessons learned, all of that type of stuff. So yeah, if we can do something that's quite official, that's got the weighting of a university or something behind it, I think that would be really beneficial as well.
Right, and do you think that will be able to go on for some years, so you get that longitudinal profile?
I hope so. I mean, you always have to, we'll have to probably put a post into it. So it's, you know, building that business case, isn't it? But I think we'll need to. I mean, I can see Jenny Braley's on this call. So some of my team have been talking to Jenny about trying to make sure that these homes are performing in the long term, because we're investing a huge amount of money into these properties. And it's so important that they do meet these expectations. I would hate to be here saying we're going to get a 70% saving on energy bills and then have our customers move in, particularly those on social rent, and not be achieving that. I mean, that would be terrible. So we need to make sure that we don't just hand them over and walk away, that we are looking after them in the long term, and we are getting that feedback. And how people are living in them and helping that education piece. You know, our dream is to have somebody to help with that education piece, not just for the first, you know, when they move in and get their keys, but over the first year, 2 years, and that we've got a system for where there are sales, resales. I mean, they come back into our leasehold team and information sent back out. So we are in the early stages, but we're trying to think about all that stuff in the future.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll just, there are a number of questions I'm not going to get through, but maybe you could answer them afterwards in the chat as well. I would like to ask a little bit more about skills, I think, because as you said, you know, skills, well, we all know this is a big problem. People being able to work to these sort of standards of, you know, proper building, really. What have you put in place? Have you been working with the local colleges? You know, how have you sort of tried to develop that? You said you've got a 10-year skill plan at York.
Yeah, so there is a 10-year skill plan at York, and we've also, so as part of what my team did, we got a local government association grant, which allowed us to do we did a green skills survey across the city, working with York College and also our in-house contractors, because we have our own sort of maintenance teams. So to see where the gaps are, and then I think we put 65 contractors through some training, but I would say it's a drop in the ocean. It's basically the truth. I think York College are starting to now run much more regular sort of green skills courses, and it's trying to build that, isn't it? It's trying to get away from, you know, everybody, the skill set that we have is gas boilers. That's, you know, M&E seems to be the big thing that keeps coming back to us, but it's just trying to move away from that and yeah, get green skills and embrace the sort of the future of construction. So I think we're trying our best on it, but I think it probably needs a bit of a push from central government. In the same way they've got a big push on MMC, it feels like there needs to be a big push on that sort of green skills at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sophie. I'm going to have to stop you there, because and please, if you can pop into the chat and answer the rest of the questions I haven't been able to cover, that would be great. Thank you.
I will. Thank you.
And obviously stay with us, and we're going to move over to hear an individual experience of a self-built house from Tim Larner, who's a Passivhaus custom builder and small-scale developer. So I'm going to hand straight over to Tim. You need to unmute, Tim, and then share your presentation. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. I shall just put the presentation up.
And a reminder again that there'll be opportunity, if you ask any questions, put them in the chat for Tim, and we'll get through a few of them probably. So off you go, Tim.
Is that?
Yeah, that's all that. That's great. Yeah. Brilliant.
Okay. In discussion with Adam Harper, who I see is on the participants list, we felt together that maybe for most of you guys who are professionals, you don't necessarily find out what happens once Passivhaus has been commissioned and you've walked away. And we discussed a few possible items, but it seemed that the energy one was probably the one to go for, particularly at this time, and to really just find out what we found out about the energy performance of our Passivhaus. Oh, sorry. So that's our house there, front and back elevations. And if you want more of the detail, it's on the Passivhaus database with an ID of 6164. Just a bit of the background story. We found this plot, two plots in fact, in mid-2016, successfully negotiated and started design in October of that year. It had consent for 2 detached properties already, and we worked on replacing that consent with something which gave us a passive house. We did consider 2 passive houses, but we felt probably the market wasn't ready for a spec built passive house, but we built a relatively low energy house alongside it. The build started in September of that year, and we moved in just before Christmas in 2018. And if you want a 5-minute story of that process, there's a YouTube link there at the bottom of that slide. Those there are the main players, the people we involved. Certainly as a first-time developer, very important to get a good team of professionals around us in delivering this. And so there they are, but I won't talk any more about that. It's there for the record. So our key concepts and our parameters for our build were, for our own house, we wanted to aim for Passive House certification. We wanted a high degree of energy self-sufficiency, and we wanted it to be an all-electric house without any gas supply. We split the house front and back rather than upstairs, downstairs, so we live both on the first floor. I'm on the first floor at the moment in this space that you can see behind me. So we have 2 living rooms on the south side of the house with really good, a lot of windows, really nice places to sit. And we sleep on the northern side of the house, so slightly unconventional in terms of the layout. And in particular, we wanted a house that was suitable for aging in comfortably and be able to adopt downstairs living with our 2 downstairs bedrooms if we got to that stage where we didn't really want to be tackling stairs. We have 2 bedrooms and 2 capable of being bedrooms, so they're sort of dual purpose rooms. So it's nominally a 4-bedroomed house with 2 flexible rooms and 168 square metre internal floor area. We tried to be as sustainable as we could in construction, but we're in the pre-pH ribbon period in doing that. But here's timber frame, and we have tried to maximise the use of timber in the construction. And we really just wanted to be sort of low footprint living generally. So it's a relatively good location for sustainability, although you can rightly criticise me for having 2 people living in a 168 square metre house. I'll put my hand up to that one. In terms of energy design principles, we wanted to maximise electricity generation, and so we have solar PV covering the whole of the south-facing roof. It is almost due south-facing. It's only about 10 or 15 degrees out from due south. And we pretty early on decided we wanted a house battery so that we could actually get from dusk to dawn most of the year and use electricity that we generated during the hours of daylight. We felt gas was a complete no-no. When Phil did the initial passive house planning package runs, there really didn't seem to be a heat pump small enough for the house. It only needed 1.5 kilowatts to heat it when it was freezing outside. Phil was sought to lead us down the MVHR post heater route, and we were perhaps not so enthusiastic on that. And having been dogged users of economy 7 tariffs in the past, we felt that we could, and thinking that in fact the market was moving towards more time differentiated electricity tariffs, we felt that we could use a lot of our electricity in off-peak periods when it was cheap, and that we would use the thermal mass of the house to the full and put money into simple controls whereby we could control the energy use and the time at which we drew energy. So we went for underfloor heating, but deliberately over-specified to enable off-peak use largely for our heating. So although we have 1.5 kilowatts of power needed, we've actually got about 3.5 kilowatts of installed capacity, so that we can use that when we want to, switch it off when electricity is expensive. And what's wrong with the occasional plug-in of the fan heater or the panel radiator if we need it? It's so, the house, individual rooms are so responsive to a little blast of heat that it's very easy if temperatures are falling off in the evening. We have a large thermal storage, the building itself, and also 300 litres of hot water. We find that we can leave the MVHR on very low settings, calibrate that right down, and still get our 30 cubic meters of fresh air each every hour. So, and we regard it as very convenient living. We have no tumble dryer because we've designed in drying space within the house in our plant room. And I think the message of all of this is, if you live in a passive house, then be prepared to adapt, and that behavioural change is quite a lot of fun. It's not necessarily a challenge, but because we were involved in the design and the specification, we understood in broad terms the beastie we were getting when we moved in. But as you'll see later, it's taken us quite a while to actually learn how to use it.
Tim, you've got about 5 minutes more to speak.
Thank you. So our overall impressions of passive house living are there. I think Jeff Colley's TEDx talk on affordable luxury is an excellent way. It really is high quality of life. And we did a little YouTube video with Phil there, which you can link to, as well as being extremely cheap to run. I'll talk more about costs if people want to, but I'll gloss over that now. In terms of its overall view, energy performance, PHPP said that we would need 10.3 megawatt hours per annum of energy, split as according to those figures, notably with a very large chunk for the hot water, nearly half for hot water, and that we would produce about half of that from our roof, from the solar PV through our 7 kilowatt peak solar panels. In use, quite a different story. We are only using 5 megawatt hours per annum, slightly less on our solar panel array than was predicted, but I think that's probably the specification of the inverter that is responsible for that. Very difficult to know without sub-metering what we're using on what. That's my best guess as to where that 5 megawatt hours is being used, but it is very, I would not want to be quoted on that, but it's an attempt to show where we're using less. I can talk more about the way that seasonal variations in terms of use of electricity and export of electricity go, but as you can see, massive seasonal imbalances, so no hope of being off grid because we need masses of electricity in the winter and we send it a lot out in the summer where we barely use any grid electricity, but I'll come back to that if people are interested. Trends, we've been in nearly 4 years now. We're learning to use it. We're working with the grain of Passivhaus quite well. I think we're understanding the significance of thermal mass and of internal insulation, particularly for water. And we're learning how to buy electricity when it's cheaper. Obviously trying to keep up with the market as that changes. But really the overriding significance is back to water. And I do think that none of this is terribly highfalutin stuff, but understanding what clients want, what their objectives are, what their good life looks like, and supporting them to live well, I think is vital. So back to the water. It really is nearly all about water. That's our very sophisticated water recycling system. So little water used outside the house. And if you've got good eyesight, you can see that Yorkshire Water think that we'll use only 2/3 as much water next year as we did last year. Heating it is very important, and there's a lot of things I could say about heating hot water, how it's done, how hot you want your water, issues of plumbing specification and design. Again, too much to go into now, but I can come back to that. And remember, we were predicted to use 4.9 megawatts, and I think we're at about 0.6 megawatts. That's a massive, massive reduction from what was predicted by PHBP. Trends, again, this shows the kind of learning process we've been through from moving in at Christmas 18, and our energy use was broadly balanced in sense of we imported a little more than we exported at the beginning, but now we're exporting about 50% more than we're bringing in from the grid. So we really are sort of negative carbon in operational terms, at least as regards energy. Takeaway lessons, well, I think understanding your client is so important, educating them through the process of design, involving them in decisions, and energy design is, as you know, we've already heard, it's more and more important with the higher price of energy. Managing those interfaces between the sort of architectural design, the renewable design, and particularly plumbing contractors and electrical contractors to a degree, absolutely vital to get the desired result. So just a few concluding remarks there. Is it all about energy? Well, I'm still not sure it is all about energy. I think it is about comfort and about quality. But perhaps it should be more about energy as people get a heightened perception of how much household energy is costing. Energy is not the same as carbon, but they're obviously very closely related. And with regard to electricity, we're on a fast moving path towards zero carbon electricity. Definitely need to consider both design and in-use issues. This is not an either or. Did we get it completely right? No, I don't think we did, and I'll tell you about the problems if you want to hear more about those, but generally we are exceptionally pleased. And I think, you know, operational carbon, we found quite easy to get to zero and negative operational carbon. Embodied carbon, less so. Phil and I collaborated on a pH ribbon run post the house being commissioned. It's a great start, but my feeling is it's some way to go in terms of really understanding the amount of embodied carbon. So I would finish by saying negative operational carbon housing is achievable, doesn't cost a fortune, and I think the possibility of financially viable passive house is there to be grasped if people will step up to the plate amongst the mass builders, and there's a massive quality gain almost as a bonus. Thank you very much indeed, Chris, for giving me that bit extra time.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. We've got a couple of minutes for questions, so I have to try and keep on schedule. So I'm going to ask you just to give very brief answers to the couple of questions that I think are interesting. The first one is Adam, who you know, has asked to what extent you think that Passivhaus occupants need to understand how Passivhaus works for it to perform as designed.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think of the massive manuals that you get with any piece of equipment that you buy, however you buy it in a shop online, you've got everything there, and virtually nothing, as I understand it, is handed over to someone who's made this X £100,000 investment in a new home. So really, I do think, yes, both written and YouTube videos and perhaps a sort of 6 months afterwards, seminar almost to help people up that learning curve.
Yeah, sure. And a very simple question: is there anything now you've living there that you would have changed?
Well, I think I think going for the underfloor heating has its challenges, in the sense that when I did physics at school, I learned that heat rises. But Passivhaus seems to defy that principle, and heat very much stays where it is, which is a good reason for going for post heater in the MVHR system. So I think we would have put a bit more underfloor heating upstairs just to supplement our main screed-based underfloor heating throughout the ground floor. That's the main one. Overheating, it's not going to get any easier, and the most important window in our house, you probably can't quite see it here, but it's in the roof, and it stays open a lot of the summer to get a thermal stack going. But without that, I think overheating, we would have had real problems.
Great, thank you, Tim. There are a couple more questions. There's one about the heating. I'm going to leave you to answer that in the chat, if you could, Tim. Because we're running out of time. I would have liked to discuss that, but I think we haven't got time. And a nice comment from Martin Broadus, who's Social Housing Director, about the challenge of engaging residents in maximising the benefits of Passivhaus. So nice follow on there. Right, we're going to move on. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you for the questions, and if you just have a look in the chat if there's anything else you want to add, Tim. So we're going to move on to Kevin Pratt, who's the director at Pure House. Pure House have been doing a pioneering, I'd say small developers. I hope you don't mind me putting it that way, Kevin. We've known each other for some years, and really talking about their journey to as a Passivhaus developer really in Yorkshire. So I'm going to hand over to you, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
And you've got about 10 minutes to speak, I think.
All right, okay, yeah, well, thank you. Well, first of all, isn't it great that we're having a conversation about Passivhaus in Yorkshire? I suppose the next stop will be Passivhaus in the UK, making it standard. I know that Scotland are looking to do that. So, yeah, let's upwards and onwards. So let's keep these conversations going. So we started out, I'm going to share my screen. We started out, there we go. Let me just get that up. Can you see that okay?
It's just coming.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so we started out on an old derelict site, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a little bit like the industry, a bit derelict, a bit out of date, and needs an update and a revamp. So we used a stick build system. We used the Beat Passive system. The reason for that is it gave us good access. It was down an old country lane. It was an old lady who lived there previously, and she'd been deceased for 15 years when we went in and had to take down the original building. There was trees coming up through the building. So, yeah, that was interesting seeing it turn from, an old derelict building to something quite beautiful, quite stunning. So, yeah, the stick build system, we found it very, very simple and easy to be able to apply, given the logistics of the site. We had some good training and some good support from John Blowers, who worked with BT Passive, is now part of the team. So yeah, we were really pleased, really excited when we managed to get ourselves to a 0.4 air changes score. And I remember the dread when they came and they used the eco bead, and what they did is we had it all airtight, and they came in with like a wood cutter and just started puncturing holes in the membrane. I remember I was like, no, don't do that. But we managed to overcome the trauma and get back to airtighting. And that's the thing about Passivhaus, as you'll all appreciate. It just takes that little bit of detail and that little bit of persistence to really get everything right. Very much worth it once you put the effort in. We've actually moved on this time to using a different product as opposed to eco breed, which is more sustainable. So we're constantly and never-ending, progress of improving ourselves, improving the product that we're creating. So we got to 258 kilograms of CO2 emissions, the cradle to grave calculation, which at the time exceeded Boris Johnson's 2030 target that he failed to hit miserably, and then revised to 600. I know that everybody on here understands that, so I don't need to go into too much detail. I'm not really the techie guy behind the team, as I'm sure some of you guys will pick up. But yeah, we managed to exceed what Boris Johnson had set, and now we're moving on to an improved and updated version. We managed to get the Passivhaus Institute low building standard. It was 22 kilowatts of heat that we had modelled and actually achieved, should I say. So yeah, just to give you another image. So this is the finished product. You can see the aluminium clad and the fact that we was lucky enough to win the Yorkshire Residential Property Awards, where we declared war on climate change, and taking what we're doing by the scruff of the neck and really pushing forward and making an impact in this region and looking to scale that impact. And we talked a lot about, or I've heard a reoccurring theme about the green skills gap, and about education, and that's something that we've really embraced. We've started now. We're actually going to be working with 6 colleges in the region, teaching them the lessons that we've learned. So I think it really is all about education. I know there were a comment, I nearly intervened, but I didn't. I held myself back. There were a comment about evaluation. So one of the hurdles that we had was we achieved.
Sorry, Kevin, I'm just going to interrupt you. It looks as though the slides are stuck. I don't know whether that's a technical thing or whether it's just you're so impassioned that you.
I've digressed. Yeah, I've digressed a little bit. I haven't done a formal.
The slides aren't moving. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, that's fine. Sorry.
I haven't progressed into a formal PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, I see. It's just an image. Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. So where were you? Lost my train of thought there, Chris.
Very sorry, Kevin. Several people were asking. It's fine. You just get your
So that was the point. Valuation. Okay. So we managed to secure a buyer straight away. We literally put it on the market, and the lady that had been looking for the house, she'd been looking for a passive house. She wanted to build a passive house for 15 years. And the ironic thing is we got our house down valued to what I'd call a traditional value. And as a result of that, the sale fell out, so that were a real barrier that we paid a price for that. We really paid a price for that. and this comes in line with the conversation about valuation. We did manage to sell for the price that we was looking to achieve, which we originally achieved. So this is a major sort of barrier for us, and it really did put a lot of pressure on us. So we achieved the desired price, we got it down valued, we achieved that same price again, and we got the valuation accurate, shall we say accurate, the desired valuation. So yeah, I do think there's a premium. I would argue there's, you know, roughly sort of 15 to 20% premium, and there are documents out there that have shown that. Some documents show as low as 7 to 8% premium. We feel that if you get the aesthetics right and it looks nice, that I think you can get around a 20% premium. So let's move on to just one more shot. So this is a shot from the front. So yeah, we've gone from this original prototype to now moving on to delivering you know, a 20 house scheme. We've set up an off-site manufacturing facility, the Zero Carbon Workshop, and we're going to be changing how we do things, revising and improving on the product. So it's, as I was saying before, constant and never-ending improvement, which is what we're all about at the company. So what I'll do is I'll just take you through briefly the slides. Can you see the Pure House sign there?
No, nothing's changing, Kevin.
Oh, nothing's changed. So you can't see my new slide.
You've still got the original stick.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Let's go to this one then. Is maybe it's not changed.
There you are.
Yeah. Okay. So this is our new development. So they are only CGIs, just in design phase. So we're looking for achieving a much better standard than what we've done, and you can see the design there. You know, the north facing side, very small windows, versus going back to the south facing, very large windows. So yeah, really excited about delivering this. And what we've done now is we've set up a Zero Carbon Workshop, where we're producing timber frame panelized cassette systems. So yeah, we've really embraced this idea of improving, and I think the off-site construction, it really brought it home to us just how much waste happens on site. You know, so actually getting an off-site manufacturing facility is highly favorable in terms of reducing carbon emissions. But one of the things that we're looking to move on to now is creating a little bit of a think tank where we're bringing in people who've got experience to share knowledge, and this is the sort of thing we're doing here. So we'd really celebrate what's happening here, and we're happy to engage with people, talking to them about their experiences. And obviously the big challenge is retrofit. You know, that's the tricky one. That's the one that's hard, or harder, I would say. I think it's a challenge that can be met. You know, you've got basic principles that need to be help you to navigate through, you know, uncharted territories, so to speak. I know there's a lot of people here with experience from retrofit, and you know, it's been happening for a long time. But it's relatively new to the market. You know, for example, within our think tank, we've got a chap who he's first started retrofitting his house 30 years ago, and he, in his own words, he made every mistake in the book, and he just had to learn, you know, in the fight, so to speak. Whereas these days we've got these platforms where we can share knowledge. And so yeah, really pleased to answer questions if there's any questions for people.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. And I'm going to just grab a couple, and you know, we've got a couple of minutes for questions. Really, I think the interesting one, perhaps for you as well, is how do we increase consumer demand? Obviously, you know, we probably all like to see Passivhaus as the building regulations standard, but we're not there. So how do we increase consumer demand to drive up passive house builds, and especially with the larger volume house builders? I mean, you've moved on a long way with the new plans, haven't you, in terms of the scale you're doing, but the volume, you know, what's your feeling about all of that?
Yeah, well, I spoke to a lot of people who were really interested in the homes that we built, and I've got a real sense for it. And I do feel like people have got an appetite for something different. And you can say that those are innovators or early adopters, but I do think the early adopters are coming. I'm always an optimist, but I'm seeing the changes at government level. I'm seeing the changes, you know, for example, us educating, going into colleges and educating people. It's an education. You said this, Chris, educate and supply model. People need to know what they're buying. So if you can tell them that you're actually going to reduce your bills, that's a big, big thing, especially in today's energy crisis. So I really do believe it's coming. I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, interesting. I'm going to ask you, go off piece, just ask you a question around what, you know, what would be your one sort of message for small developers? Because, you know, I mean, you're not as small as you were. It's quite, you know, you've scaled up a long way, but nevertheless, you know, modest-sized developers. What's your key lesson for them?
Just get around the right people. Get around the right people who can help you, who've got experience, because you can't take chances. In my opinion, you know, you can't afford to make mistakes on the go. You've got to learn as you're going from people who've already been down that path. And
I'm just a little bit about, actually about MMC and insurance. Have you, there are some comments I can't read in time, but anyway, have you had problems with getting insurance? Sort of insurance?
No, we haven't had any problems with getting insurance. You know, one of the reasons we went with BT Passive is because they had approval with all the lenders, but we did a lot of due diligence on that. That's important, because if you can, I can give an example of this where the lender didn't recognise the homes that they were buying. They didn't understand the quality of them, so therefore that affected the person buying. So you have to work with people who understand, and this is, again, you have to then go and educate if you need to. So yeah.
Yeah, no, lovely. Thank you. A really nice comment. I'm going to wrap up there because I know if I ask you another question, we'll run over time, and I've got to keep us on time. So thank you very much, Kevin. And I know it's very brief, but I think it's given people an insight into, you know, you as a developer. So it's really useful. Really,
and I'd be happy to help if I can. So yeah.
If there's any other questions for Kevin, pop them in the chat, and if you can stay, just keep an eye out for those, Kevin. That'd be great. Right, we are. We're on time. So we're going to break now for 10 minutes into breakout rooms, which Chailey and or Lucy are going to facilitate. The idea is to give you a chance to really talk about how we can increase uptake of passive house in Yorkshire. That's what we're all interested in here, isn't it? So 10 minutes and then come back. And if you've got any particular insights from those discussions, pop them in the chat as soon as you come back, because we won't have a chance to talk about them. And then when we come back, we'll just be last sort of wrapping up and sort of any sort of information to share around the group. Okay.
Great, thank you.